Minerals are the first thing we stop absorbing well. Protein is the last thing we stop absorbing well. A UN study was done because they wanted to figure out how are we going to spend money in refugee camps. We want to have the money go to the most important things. So they studied malnourishment. And they found that minerals were one of the first things that people stopped absorbing because as the digestive system breaks down, it's not easy to absorb those things. But protein is so vital to our bodies. The body is smart enough to continue to absorb the protein as much as possible. But so this side over here, you can see it looks really like yucky. It's like a wasteland. It's not very healthy. And on the bad side here, you can see the standard American diet. It's called the SAD, the SAD diet, which is like lots of fried foods, lots of hamburgers, lots of fast foods, which are not nutrient rich. They're nutrient deficient, and they actually rob your body of the nutrients that it has already inside because it has to have what it needs to produce things, so it's going to look for it anywhere it can, and it'll start breaking down your own body in order to get those nutrients. And that's why it would look like this in your intestine if it's not healthy. All right, so I mentioned briefly about the small intestine and the immune system as a barrier function. So in our small intestine, we want to absorb very small nutrients to rebuild them inside our body and reform them into things that we want, that we need to build our tissues with. Now, when we first eat food, it's in large chunks. And the digestive juices, the hydrochloric acid, the enzymes, and our chewing are all meant to break it down into smaller, smaller, smaller pieces. So how many people have a screen door at their house? Raise your hand, yeah, okay. And the screen door is there to keep insects and other things out, right? But you want the air to pass through freely. So there's a certain size that the screen has that will allow certain size particles or things to come in, but it doesn't allow other things larger to get in. Our small intestine is very much like a screen door. It is built to allow only certain size particles to get in, because larger particles could be bacteria. Or it could be something that the body says, no, that's a little too big, we aren't going to let that in until it's broken down into small pieces, then we'll let it come in. So that's part of the barrier system that we have in the small intestine. These are the little fingers that we talked about, which are the fingers, the villi. So nutrients either come in through here or they come in through this slot over here. Many people are intolerant to various components of wheat. It could be gluten, gliad, or they're also in processed foods. The companies that process foods take wheat and they reconstitute it. They break it down into all these other new things and they add stuff because wheat does not always mix well. And if you're going to have something prepared, it has to be all nice and all mixed together. So there are certain things called deamidated wheat byproducts that are in foods that one can become sensitized to as well. It's like a bacteria. The body sees it and goes, wait, I don't know what this is. It doesn't look like my body. I don't think I want it in here, so I'm going to fight it. And an inflammatory reaction occurs. Just like individuals who have wheat sensitivity, they will have an immune reaction to wheat or the components, the natural components of wheat. This becomes broken down if you have a lot of inflammation. And so big holes develop. It's just like, maybe as a child or one of your kids or your grandkids or something, they see this screen door and it's really like, wow, that's so interesting. And they take a pencil and they just poke a little hole in it. And then a fly can get in. It's sort of like that. You just poke a bunch of holes. Over time, your small intestine can get filled with these holes. And so bigger things go in the body. Even normal proteins, the body will go, whoa, it's kind of big. I think it's a bacteria. So you might start reacting to avocado or something else, even though normally it's not considered to be like an antibody, an antigen, which is something that you would react to. So we already talked about how nutrients permeate through two different avenues. And this is an electron microscope picture of damaged intestinal microvilli. So this is what happens. It's not quite like an ulcer, but it's sort of similar. Where instead of being a lot of nice fingers, you have a few broken fingers in there, or twisted fingers. And that is a defect in the barrier function of the small intestine. Other things can be there, such as critters like Giardia lamblia. And Giardia is a common parasite that individuals may contract in countries where they're traveling, and it can cause severe cramps, severe diarrhea. That can cause dehydration as well. And so sometimes people die because of dehydration due to Giardia infection. So the things, that's the parasites here on this little chart. Parasites can also be in there causing problems. Isn't that cute? Isn't that cute little critter? So if you've had a digestive disorder, digestive symptoms for quite a while, you may or may not have actually had a more in-depth testing of what's going on. One of the things that we can do is do a lab test that is called a comprehensive digestive and stool analysis. So you provide a stool specimen, send to the lab, they break it down, and they see how many extra pieces of protein are in that compared to where it should be. So we can find out whether you're digesting protein well. We can find out if you're actually digesting fats well. And if not, there could be reasons why that's the case. It can also give information, here colonic environment, it can give information about the presence of good bacteria. Everyone's heard of acidophilus and yogurts and things like that. And so those are part of the good bacteria. Some of those, when you eat them again, you're eating the yogurt with the good bacteria. It might not survive your stomach though, because the stomach is there to kill off stuff that are critters. Now sometimes you might feel like you're an acidophilus. Ever feel like you're an acidophilus? Or ever feel like you're a bifidobacterium? Well, you aren't, right? You're a human being. And so these critters are considered not you. And so the body's going to try to break these things down. But if they're strong enough, they will get down into the intestinal tract and repopulate. Also, we can test and see if there's this balance of good and bad bacteria, fungus, and parasites. So these kind of digestive analyses is called a functional approach, to see if your whole digestive system is functioning properly. Yes?
I'm just curious, under the presence of good bacteria, E. coli, and we always hear in the news and things about E. coli.
Yeah, that's a very good question. E. coli is also, there are a lot of different strains of E. coli, and we naturally have certain strains that are in our intestinal tract, and they're important for it to be there. Just like there's 450 or 500 different species of critters inside the intestinal tract, as long as they're in balance, it's okay, and you will have E. coli in there. So this is some of the information that we get here. Campylobacter specific antigen, abnormal, reference, negative is what we would want. Enterohemorrhagic Escherichia coli. So there are types of Escherichia coli that cause bleeding inside the intestine. That's what enterohemorrhagic means. Hemorrhage, bleeding. So this again, these other tests, this one was negative on the individual for that type of Escherichia coli. So there's different types. Some are healthier and some are not. Excellent question. And then here we have what's called dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in the good and bad bacteria within the intestine. So this also has a scale as far as how healthy the intestinal flora are. So here is optimal. This would be slight dysbiosis and imbalance. Over here, this is severe, severely imbalanced. So these are some of the different types of bacteria that we've been tested in this particular test. Lactobacillus, bifidobacteria, E. coli, these are all good. Gamma strep. This is as long as it's not in huge amounts, it's fine. Mucoid, E. coli, B. hemolytic strep. Hemolytic means it breaks down the blood. and you don't want that. Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, Candida albicans, you'll have a little of that, but Candida is a mold/fungus. They can cause havoc in the digestive system. We can also do food antibody testing because sometimes your digestion problems are due to food allergies. So there are blood tests that can test for as many as 200 different things at one time. And if you are allergic to something, you have a high amount of antibodies to it, you have to avoid it. If you have a mild number, then you can rotate every 4 or 5 days, you can have some, but you shouldn't eat it more often than that. But these food allergies could be the cause of your digestive problems, or one of the components.
So the answer then is just don't have it.
When we do these particular tests, of food antibody testing, it actually comes with an analysis, and it gives you a chart that says, these are the ones you can eat anytime you want. These are the ones that you have to eat no more often than every 4 or 5 days. These are the ones you have to avoid. So it makes it very clear. It's very simple, and it's easier to figure this out, and what you should or should not eat, and how often.
Okay.
With that particular kind of.
But there's no way to put something back into the body to balance it out. For example, I know that I'm lactose intolerant.
So if you're lactose
and I
intolerant.
can't eat onions, raw onions. I know that.
Yes. So
And
raw
so-
onions and lactose intolerance are things you just can't do. Yes. You would probably have very high antibody levels to it, meaning that your body, if onion comes in your body, it goes, you know, that looks like those bacteria or those viruses, we have to fight it. It's an onion. It's not a bacteria virus, but the body interprets it that way. And so you're going to have a strong reaction, and yes, you have to avoid it.
So
Because
there's
you
no
know that.
way to get it back into the body, because it wasn't always like this.
Yeah, it wasn't always like that. And sometimes there may be other foods that you ate that you had some sensitivity to, and those foods are so similar. They look the same to the body, and so then all of a sudden it's called cross-reactivity. You might have a cross-reactivity reaction due to one food is sort of similar to another to the body. And so even though it's not the same thing that you're allergic to, all of a sudden it's going, I don't know, that looks close enough, let's just fight it to be sure. So yeah, sometimes over time you might be able to cool off the immune system so its reactivity isn't as high, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to avoid it.